Stages of recruitment are a lot like a funnel, if you think about it this way. It has a very wide mouth at the top because we want to attract as many qualified applicants as possible. But of course, not every applicant is going to go through the funnel. And in fact, only those that are qualified will pass on to the next stage. And so over time, that funnel narrows so that there are fewer and fewer applicants that make it through to the next phase. Because there are multiple steps to the recruitment process. We start with the initial applicants, and then we screen out the ones that don't have the skills. And then when we get into the selection process, there are multiple steps from there. So our goal is to make sure that that funnel mouth is as big as possible, given the job, given the recruitment style and the messaging that we're going to use. And then from there, we want to be able to screen out those who are really underqualified and not able to do the job. As I said, the better job we do in recruitment, the easier selection is for us because we end up having a good applicant pool to choose from, meaning things will be easier for us to select the right person because we have lots to choose from. And that's our goal, to be able to have the best applicants possible. And there are hurdles that people have to go through, right? And we want to make sure that those hurdles or those stages are reasonable, and that they are not making people jump through hoops that are not realistic. Our goal, though, in our recruitment process is to make sure we are maintaining people's interest. Because if we do not attract people and maintain that interest, they're going to walk away. When they walk away, we lose a potentially good employee who could come work for us. So we want to do what we can, just as we would in marketing, to sell the company, to sell its attributes, to sell what benefits we can offer to them, and to influence their job choices in the long run. So in the generating applicant phase, our job is to figure out how to get as many qualified applicants as possible. So the quantity quality formula. So we need to look at recruitment sources that yield the kinds of quality applicants that we want for this particular job. Now, the most important thing to remember is that different recruiting sources yield different quality of applicants depending on the type of job that it is. Some sources are really good for marketing jobs. Some sources are really good for engineering jobs. Some sources are really good for entry-level jobs. Some sources are good for HR jobs, right? We want to make sure we find the right source to give us the right pool of applicants for the job that we are trying to set up. And we need to be very, very clear about exactly what the requisite skills are needed for the position, because that needs to be communicated in the job ad. So when you do the job description, as we've talked about, the job description defines the relevant skills and makes sure then that the individual is able to fulfill those requirements. You remember I said previously that depending on the type of job, we might not get a lot of applicants. And that will happen when we do what we call a realistic job preview. An RJP is a typical way of doing recruiting, but it is a little bit different than the standard marketing approach to recruitment. A realistic job preview basically says, guess what? We want to attract qualified people for this job, but it's a hard job. You're going to work in high heat. You're going to have to work overtime. You're going to have to be on call. You're going to have to work weekends and nights. But it also has good attributes, right? You'll get really good benefits. You'll get really good overtime pay. So our job in the realistic recruitment process, if we're going to use what we call an RJP, you want to be as realistic as possible with a balanced approach of not only good attributes, but maybe some not so good attributes, or at least what some might think is a not so good attribute. But what I might think is a bad attribute, somebody else might think that's perfect. I don't like working weekends, but somebody else might. So they would look at that job and go, oh, great idea. I would love to just work weekends. That would be perfect for me. And I would look at it and go, oh, I would never apply for that job because I don't want to work weekends, which I do often now as a faculty member. But when I was younger, I wanted my weekends for my fun time, for me to be able to be with my friends and to go and enjoy weekends away and do things like that. And working weekends was not attractive to me. It may feel, as I said, unappealing, but remember, it's not always going to be unappealing to everybody. And if I go into a position and I know that there are going to be some challenging aspects to the job and you've told me about them in advance, I'm going in with my eyes wide open and I know what to expect. So I am going to be less unhappy with the job because you told me what to expect in the first place. So that's the job. That's the goal of the realistic job preview, is to kind of inoculate people, if you will, to make sure that they understand the good, the bad, the ugly, what would be difficult, what would be easy, and letting them choose whether or not that's a kind of a job that they want to be a part of. So there are a number of different sources that we can use. The first one, and the most common, that everybody kind of knows about, is the unadvertised job. And that's usually from a word of mouth, where I tell my friend, hey, we're hiring, come and apply. Um, or it is a walk-in where somebody simply walks in. I'm not advertising for a position, but nonetheless, when they walk in and they fill out an application, that puts them into the pool of people that I might be interested in hiring. So unadvertised jobs, job applicants tend to be upwards of 50% of positions filled that way, either through word of mouth or through walk-in applicants. Now, you can get really good applicants with word of mouth listings, mixed with respect to walk-ins, but word of mouth can be quite good if I have a really good employee and they're really happy with my company. They're engaged with the company. They are much more likely then to turn around and recommend the company to their friends to come and apply and work there. So this is the importance of engagement and why engagement matters, which is what we were talking about with employee relations a couple of modules ago. When we have good engaged employees, we are going to get a greater yield of word of mouth applicants because they're going to speak highly of the company, and that's going to attract people because of that. Then we could do what we call internal versus external recruiting sources. Our internal recruiting sources are looking at our succession plan and looking at our internal candidates and developing a way to reach out to internal candidates and attracting them to apply for promotional opportunities or lateral moves and things like that in the company. So we've got to find a way to communicate to our internal people when there are position openings. External sources are going to people outside of the company that don't work there at the current moment. And you can reach them in a number of different ways through college applications, right? We've got college fairs, through Indeed or Monster.com, through networking events, through newspaper or magazine advertisements. You know, there's a lot of ways to advertise for external sources. And we're all familiar with them because I'm sure you've all applied for a job at some point or another, and so that's how we learn about them. So what are some of the recruitment sources? Company websites are a big part of it. So you have to have a really good company website and a great portal for people to apply for jobs. We also want to have a really good applicant tracking system so we know where they are at in the application process. Have they fulfilled all the requirements? Did they upload all the materials that we expected of them? And where are they at in the process? Have they passed the initial screening? And if so, who are they interviewing with next? Or what assessment tools do they need to take next? And that applicant tracking system is part of that dashboard that we talked about when we talked again about technology and metrics and analytics. We need to have a dashboard that communicates to us what that applicant tracking system looks like, where applicants are in the process, and that needs to be available to us pretty easily. Now, there are also what we call internal transfers and promotions, and these internal transfers and promotions are opportunities internally that we want to provide to internal candidates first. Many companies have the policy that they will try to fill a position internally first, and if they can't find a good internal candidate, then they turn to external candidates. And again, the goal is we want to have a balance of internal and external applicants in our company. Because if we have all internal applicants, right, then we get a fairly homogeneous company, which can be very problematic for us. If we have a mixture of internal and external, then we make sure that we have a good mixture of both, that we are getting some fresh ideas from outsiders as well as rewarding internal people. If we only just do external, we run into a very similar problem. By hiring only externally, then we don't communicate to our employees that their work matters and that they are valued and we want them to stay here and be promoted and to advance in the company. So you do have to walk a line between rewarding internal candidates and getting them to apply for positions because we want them to feel like they can stay with the company over the long haul in their career. And at the same time, we still need to make sure we are attracting new blood from external applicants outside of the company, because we need that fresh information and fresh ideas, because if we don't do that, we end up with a very homogeneous company. And this goes back to the discussion we had some modules ago about making sure that we have a company that isn't homogeneous in the way that they like to do work and the way that they see things, because if we're too homogeneous, then we're not going to be able to compete in the world. We need that good balance between the two. So here's some other sources that you should be aware of. They call them alumni employees, which is basically people who used to work for us that left on good terms with the company. They went to another company and then they come back and they work for us again. And the advantage to that is they've gotten some skills working elsewhere and learned new things about competitors and different ways of doing work, so that when they come back to work for you, they have a broader set of skills. So they're bringing new information back into the company, broadening our human capital capacity. You can also do the referral system where we ask people through word of mouth to recommend people to come work for us. Again, these unstructured, undocumented applicants, and I mean undocumented in that we haven't developed a recruitment plan to actually reach them. They just come in unsolicited. These make up to 50% of our workforce, and word of mouth referrals are some of our best employees, because again, if a satisfied employee says, hey, come work for my company, they're not going to put their neck out to recommend somebody who's going to be a poor performer. They're very likely going to attract people who are very similar to them in terms of their quality of work ethic, and those people will then come work for us. Search firms are another really good way for us to pay somebody to find us good applicants. Now, we don't do this for entry-level positions, right? It doesn't make financial sense to do that. But we can use search firms for higher-level positions, like middle-level managers and above. If we really want to attract somebody from outside the company to come work for us, and it's a very high-profile position, a search firm can be a huge benefit for us to be able to do that. It is important, though, when we are doing our recruitment to make sure that we're really clear about legal guidelines, right? We don't want to be making sure that we are hiring people who are not, they're going to create a problem for us in terms of too much homogeneity. Right? We want to make sure we've got that good mixture. We want to make sure that we're not discriminating against people or attracting qualified people to the company and not attracting some groups over others. You always want to make sure you use a wide variety of recruiting tools. Do not depend just on word of mouth. Do not depend on drop-in applicants, right? We want to make sure we use multiple internal and external sources to create a wide variety of applicants. The wider the variety of the applicants, the greater the likelihood we will attract higher quality candidates, and then we can increase the likelihood that we will hire the best person for the job. And this is all sort of like a chain of events that has been supported from research. We want to make sure all the applicants are evaluated based on the same criteria. We do not want a situation where people are not being held to the same standards. And then lastly, we want to make sure that our referral system is actually yielding good applicants. If it's not, we shouldn't be using it as a source. There never is a situation where we want to be using a recruiting source that's yielding poor candidates. And it might be that referrals are poor candidates for us. It depends on the company, depends on the recruiting message, depends on all a number of different things. But referrals aren't necessarily a bad thing. We just don't want it to be the only source we use.